Extraordinary efforts notwithstanding, when you're born, you're already all that you're going to be. So now you can either strike up the band, prepare the hemlock, await further information, or get on with those extraordinary efforts. There was once a race of men whose sole philosophical foray was in their asking of themselves, what is the point in living only the life naturally given to man? Once the extent of the conditions are realized, what's to be done becomes simple and obvious. Once out of the garden and his brain fired up, the first misstep made by Adam was in letting thinking think of itself as consciousness. Parisians who have never been outside of Paris have no way of knowing that it is not Istanbul. They true mystics, one invalid, continually frustrating, near fatally irritating, deep personal ponder, verging on uncontrollable outrage, disguised as calm, reflective, universally directed imploration. That was the title of this. Why can't I be all of the time like I can be some of the time? There is a certain myth about man that has yet to be recognized as such. You can't not care while saying that you don't. And yes, all of you people on pensions may apply this to your chests and also to the area of stupidity. Conversational quiz in the key of D sharp, unlisted cursive. How could you identify a man of wisdom? He would be a man of silence. How could you spot a man with no useless mental preferences? He too would be silent. But if a man were too totally silent, how could you even be certain that he was a man? No. You have now run out the game. Knowing is difficult, but only if you think. Question, what do you call a person who can go off and yet still be at home? Hint, if you know someone who can do that, you better call him friend and get him to teach you how to do it. The wandering away of consciousness is the cause of all confusion. Now that thinking is a constant part of every man's life, the question is, what personal use to make of it? To one man who couldn't spell good, everything he read looked fishy. Then, after he learned to spell better, everything he read still looked fishy. Sometimes, regarding a certain matter, men will say that they don't get it, so as to try and hide the fact that they don't get it. In the full sense in which it is possible, no one is conscious who is not, moment to moment, making themselves so. One man was born with two creatures inside of him, and one of them naturally attracted his consternation, while the other one's appeal seemed to be that he was not aware of it. And if this type of, quote, information actually makes any sense to you, then welcome to the Mystics Club, bub. Proverb update courtesy Istanbul. Little things don't mean a lot. Large things don't mean a lot. Little things don't mean a little, and large things don't mean a little. So, what does that leave insofar as room to maneuver in the area of mental preferences? I don't know. Maybe they measure things differently in Turkey. Oh, and while we're thinking of it, geography update. In the lives of some, Paris and Istanbul lie side by side. Mm-hmm. To a poet, talk is like gentle falling rain. To a mystic, it is more like a relentless downpour of bird shit. So one guy said, so why don't you shut up? Another guy said, so why don't you? And the first guy said, I ask you first. To which the other guy replied, so what difference does it make? We're both the same guy. I knew that, muttered the first guy. Question, if man's original garden of paradise was brain cells, then was the cursed land to which he was later driven a place of talk cells? Mm-hmm. Never mind, don't answer that. Mm-hmm. One man's inquiry for the day. When you see the truth about life, Do you actually see it, or do you see its face in a mirror? Who, asked the alert man, do I see when I see into a reflective device? There is a certain mistaken belief that is accepted about man that is not yet recognized as such. Man is unique in two ways. He is the only creature who can be in two places at the same time, and also the only creature with such a capacity who is not generally aware of it. There is actually a third singularity to man, the ability to say things such as just done, which in one sense make no sense, yet in another do, which taken as a whole should make no sense. But hey, what's the use in being unique if you're not going to be really unique? And before we move on to more detailed discussions regarding the matter of mechanical mental assertions and denials, first this collegiate update. Mystical schools are the only ones without a fight song. And this has no reference to external sports. What is one apparent commodity that is in fact no commodity at all? Understanding. Man, while a herd creature physically, is not so otherwise, and this fact realized but by a few. Off, truly off on your own, would be the honest description of being truly conscious. There is a certain erroneous quality of man taken to be fact that has yet to be realized. Another comparison, thinking versus knowing. Knowing neither likes nor dislikes. You are not as conscious as you can be if you are not instantly aware of being so. More reasons to be spooked. A man who knows what he's doing knows what you're doing. Travel expense update. If you're not actually going anywhere, then the price to both not go and stay home is separately and cumulatively the same. In some areas there is a warning out regarding the drinking water which says that certain wandering fools are mistaking physical travel data for schematics of consciousness. Watch it, you bozos. Hey, that's what I always tell myself. My thinking, that is. To keep himself alert in his efforts afresh, one man proposed thusly to himself. Man is born awake, but could be asleep. Man is born enlightened, but could be in the dark. Man is born free, but could be in captivity. Those who will not do what it takes don't have what it takes to do it. Over the hills and through the woods, to the hills and woods we go. So, where else? And by what other means? To keep himself alert in his efforts afresh, one man pursued a constant direct engagement with things as they are. And yet another way to picture Adam gone astray is in his original recognition of a potential new ally turning into his subsequent perception of him as a foe, of it as a foe. Who but a fool curses the very road he travels? In one kingdom, through a certain curious medical procedure, verbs and actions were surgically removed from nouns and objects. And after the success of this, talk was taken from reality, thus causing the collapse of all uncertainty and confusion. Note, never be misled when you hear another kingdom spoken of, for there is but one, and you're it, and it's in you. When reality hears men speak of it, it thinks, how metaphorical. When a more conscious man hears such speech, his ears hurt, his eyes glaze, and his mind longs for the refuge of knowing. Who but the blind can ignore the very life that they lead? And finally, as regards the question of guilt in the matter of one's presence, he is at fault who is not at home. Count on it. For those of you looking for encouragement, let me point out that other than a small handful of people at any time on this planet, the rest of humanity attention. Their conscious, their mental attention. The singular aspect of man. The only thing that distinguishes humanity from hippos. Their attention is turned throughout their life exclusively to the external world. Speech can make it sound otherwise, but a cursory, immediate consideration of what's being said, and it's obvious that it's not true. It is the mind's job, as I pointed out earlier. Well, why did you bring up now that you pointed out earlier if you've already pointed out? As I pointed out earlier, in an earlier program, the mind's primary responsibility is to the external world. All you must do is if you're an ordinary person, is turn your thinking to the external world, and you have fulfilled all obligations. It is almost impossible to turn attention to the internal world. And again, you have a very discrete line between the few people and everyone else on this planet, and that everyone else on this planet group cannot see the reality of this. That if you tell them, if you just said that you heard someone say that it's almost impossible to turn attention truly, strictly to one's internal existence, all ordinary sane people will deny it, laugh at it, just dismiss it. The mind operates in such a way that it will easily say that it does turn itself in that direction. And only a few people can realize that this is not so, that it takes effort. It is not a matter of choice. It is not an ordinary person's mind, an ordinary person with their ordinary mental capacities being able to say, well, I can do it anytime I want to. It's not a matter of choice. It's a matter of ability. But as long as the mind can verbally distinguish between choices, to the mind, that is the choice. That is the reality. That's the same way as the mind finally, or at one time, let's imagine whoever it was, the first mind that thought, after it looked at a dead person, perhaps someone they cared for that owed them money maybe, and while everyone else thought, well, hey, that is what is seriously known as a bad debt. Think about the first guy that his mind went, wait a minute, what if he's not really dead? What if it's some other time, like 2 weeks from now, or 100 years from now, or around the corner, or in the spring? What if people come back to life? I get my money. As soon as somebody came up with that they put those words together, what if you come back to life even after you die? The first person ever said that. No one had ever heard of it. Nobody had ever thought about it. Once it is said, the mind can conceive of it being true. That is one of the powers of the mind. But that is not part of the basic repertoire or abilities of the mind having to do with internal affairs. That has to do more with external affairs, because that is one way in which the manipulation of the external world takes place. It's one way that technology moves. It's how people invent, is the mind at first. A man looks before there were rockets, before people could fly, before we could harness electricity and use it to change the environment, to make the environment more suitable to us. The mind must be able to look out, or it does, not must, it simply is this way. It can look out and imagine things that have not been. That is the whole nature of external progress. That is the entire smear of technology and invention. It's by the mind. Somebody coming up with a problem, or a person just realizes a problem, or a person thinks, boy, it's cold here in the cave, and his mind thinks, what if you could heat up the cave without burning everybody up with a campfire? And as soon as the mind thought it, if the first man said that, everybody else would go, well, there's no such thing. Or he said, what if there was a thing, what if we had a campfire that you could move around that was like in a box, and you could plug it in the wall, and you could shut it off at night? Everybody goes, that's crazy. But as soon as the mind says it, it is possible. And within 4 or 5 minutes, or repeat it 4 or 5 times, another minds can conceive of it being true. That is the nature of it. It does not always come to pass. But from there, if you can see it, it's a small step to the kinds of irrelevant dreams that men have, such as life after death, or that there is some God figure who strongly resembles us, or vice versa, who is keeping an eye on all of this in a personalized manner. Now, or whatever, talking with the dead, flying through space, out-of-body experiences, out-of-brain experiences. I guess it would be in-brain experiences. At any rate, those sorts of adult, childish ideas are not simply spring full-blown from people's putrid imagination or from some neural anomaly. Once you realize that that is the basic responsibility of the mind, requires that it be able to think of those things which are not true as far as the mind is aware at that time. From there, in the external world, you can see the need for it. Well, there it is. It couldn't be more obvious. I see you're going to take a trip. At any rate, it should be obvious that the mind must be able to invent and to move things along in the physical world. That it must be able to think of things that have yet to be. That is the nature of invention. That is the nature of so-called scientific and technological evolution. But then when it's turned inward, it does not have to serve any useful purpose. Not that you can see at the moment, such as believing in life after death. Once somebody said that, think about how silly it sounded the first time. Think about the first time all the people on the planet, you died, and that was it, you know. Finally, you probably got sophisticated and civilized enough that they began moving the dead bodies out of the cave once they realized, where the stench was coming from and why the maggots were in their bedclothes to such a degree. At any rate, but imagine the first guy that goes, you know what? I bet people actually don't really die. Now, this is after people's been dying for, who knows, hundreds, thousands of years and rotting and disappearing. And the first guy goes, you know what? I bet people, when they die, don't actually die, they come back to life. Think what demand he was in at parties. And yet nowadays, the leaders of countries, the presidents, the leaders of whole packs, of whole nations, look right in the camera, look right at the people, and talk about life after death and how we'll all meet in paradise. It serves immediate, observable purposes having to do with the external world, but turned internally, what purpose does it serve? I said it served none. Of course, the ordinary people, it obviously serves some. But when I said individually, the question was, what purpose does it serve? What purpose does it serve to increase one's understanding? And if it was someone such as a few that I was addressing, then the answer is none. You can say, well, I believe in life and death. I hope for life. You can believe anything you want to. But if you have any sense at all, if you're in any way wired up to do this sort of thing, it's not a matter of attacking ideas of life after death or anybody's ideas. It's a matter of whether you question the idea of the information, and it doesn't take any great analysis because you've already had the time to analyze it through experience. But you're not attacking somebody's idea or any idea. It's whether the idea, the information apparently contained therein, does it serve me any useful purpose? Of course, you're sort of, if you want to speed up, you're kind of wasting your time to pick out any one idea. All you got to do is, are there any ideas out there in public that can serve me usefully, individually? And the answer is, I believe the answer is Indianapolis before 1936. I'm not positive, but I think that's it. To try and turn the mind, to try and turn one's mental attention on the internal world is an activity that is so limited on this planet that it's almost impossible to talk about in any reasonable terms, because ordinary minds, as I have previously noted, well, see, there you go again. If you previously noted it, why did you repeat it? Well, you asked me that already. Why did you ask me that twice? I think I got him. I'll be back with you on that. Okay. Ordinary thinking is so equipped and so used to denying that, that is, to believing that ordinary thought is reflective, self-analytic, that their whole area is involved with it, all the way ranging from philosophy to psychology, that is their professional, full-time intention is to study the inner workings of man. It's not so. It is all tied to the external world. The only reason that, from our view, from the view of the few, and I'm not going to stand here and I can take up the other side and then keep dismantling it, but I'm just going to point it out to you, those of you who can hear it. Even psychology, which would apparently be the non-belief-based, scientifically intended investigation and study of man's inner life, is no such thing. It simply is not. It is only based, the only interest that ordinary minds have in their so-called inner workings is in relationship to any kind of dysfunction, problem, complaint they're having with their relationship to the external world. Mm-hmm. That's it. And you either see it or you don't, and I'm not going to argue it. Even philosophy does not study the inner workings of man. What it is studying, and what is always studied, those who call themselves philosophers, the whole area considered to be philosophy, what it is studying is what the person thinks about the external world. Or if they really get fancy, they're trying to study, what they reflect on their thinking about the external world. But that is really an obscure area of that obscure science, philosophy itself. But you know the popularity that philosophy in the mainstream, or the mainstream philosophy, you know what success it experiences, what popularity. So when it gets down to the obscure part of attempting to reflect upon their own reflection of what they think about life, sad to think. I mean, it's sad to think the low level of demand for philosophers today anyway, but even those that are philosophically philosophical. Now that I think about it, I really feel I'm getting depressed, because those people probably can't even raise up an audience sitting home alone. That is damn near spooky if it wasn't such as us talking about it, and of course it's not spooky at all. It's what makes it funny. It just sounds spooky. Let me give it a heading. Tonight's topic will be how not to waste your time in life. That's what I should have done to start with. Okay, here we go. Imagine I just got through reading the news. Here we go. How not to waste your time in life. Okay, now we got it. Now we're getting somewhere. And we're speaking of, you surely know, in non-physical ways, because it is beyond this show's area of interest to have anything to do with the external world. We're not talking about health, finances, social affairs, sports. I guess that about covers it. We're not speaking of that. How not to waste your time in areas not within those just noted. The first always is, have no concern whatsoever as to where your thoughts come from. This is even worse. I started off with the most extreme example of wasteful time expenditures, because this one is not only the most wasteful, it is the most dangerous. It is truly explosive. It should not be handled by ordinary people. There is no danger. There is no danger. You are not harming yourself, even potentially, to never give any attention to where your thinking comes from. I would implore all of you that if you ever run across someone who seems philosophically bent, those inclined to be reflective, those given to waxing and musing Avoid them. Avoid them like you would brown shoes. The plague. Brown shoe plague. Avoid them to that extreme. Do not ever, if were you to run across, let us say, just for the sake of speculation, just this is theoretical, but were you to run across a psychologist who understood anything about the workings of the human mind and consciousness, and he attempted or she attempted to engage you in meaningful conversation, there's no need to be impolite, but tell them that you have an important engagement somewhere. In fact, if you have to stretch the truth, tell them that you have a dental appointment or perhaps a close relative is dying. But by all means, do not, I repeat, do not, under any conditions, let that kind of person, should you meet one, engage you in conversation, serious conversation. Also, for any of those who consider yourself perhaps a bit more spiritual, if you were to, in the same kind of theoretical way, run across a theologian who actually understood anything about the inner workings of man, them also do not talk to. Do not let them give you advice. Do not ask them questions other than which is the closest, the nearest way to the nearest bus stop, or how can I get out of town. Subheading of that, you should never look at any of the thoughts you have, any of the specific thoughts, and to ask yourself if they have any useful validity. This is particularly true. This is even a subheading under that. This would be 2 under A, which was under big 1, I guess. Is if you actually slipped up and engaged in any sort of attempted objective, well, strike attempted. If you're able to engage in any impartial observation of thinking, and you were to discover this, theoretically speaking, that you were to discover that the majority of what you call thinking is based upon assertions and denials, likes and dislikes, of one type or the other, that were passing through your mind. And I'm speaking to you as obviously what you are, as a sophisticated, educated, well-rounded, very intelligent and insightful man or woman or something else. But if you were to slip up and to see that almost all of what passes through your mind is in some way preferential, that it is based upon assertions, denials of that which you seem to be observing, considering, being influenced, being stimulated by, from the external world, and you realize that your reaction mentally to it, almost all of it, this is all theoretical, of course. That meant something else, didn't it? Of course. It's theoretical, of course. But if you were to see that, do not, what was this? Little a under 2 and do not ask yourself, do not attempt any impartial consideration of why, on what basis do I feel so strongly that the thoughts I just had about whatever the subject is, why do I feel so strongly that it is proper? My support that I just heard something and my thoughts went, to some degree, yes, I agree. Or you just heard something, you just read something, there was some external stimuli to which your thinking reacted in a manner that was like, well, you idiot. Ha! Do not ever try and consider on what basis do I, an intelligent, insightful, sophisticated person with such vigor and determination, what has driven me, what has brought me to the place that I can, with such certainty, respond to this with an unequivocal, ha! Do not ever do that. This is, as I pointed out, the first category is not only a waste of time, but this can be truly dangerous. You can harm yourself. You could adversely affect what I have already described you as obviously being, to wit, intelligent, sophisticated, well-rounded, intelligent, insightful people. It can damage that kind of standing. I must admit, since that I did not adequately prepare for tonight on the basis of what I decided in midstream would be the topic of tonight. And so I cannot continue to run through these numbers of the outline. You're going to have to kind of piece it together. I am somewhat winging it, as that famous trumpet player, Mr. Manone, used to say. He of the one cufflink. But this would be perhaps number 2 in the reasons why you should avoid at all costs ever trying to investigate in any strict, pure manner the workings of you internally. Number 2, well, no, that isn't what I said, was it? Was how not to waste your time and such. Number 2 would be never ask yourself why you feel either aggressive or fearful of life. If you ever have such a thought, the first thing you should do is tell your thinking, well, you're going to die. That's why you're upset. And that will work on most people's thinking. You say, well, sure, you're upset. You're going to die. If it doesn't work, then rush, grab a newspaper or turn on television or try and conjure up in your imagination some horrible scene you remember of some relative dying, or just maybe you went past a wreck on a highway and you saw somebody off of a motorcycle mangled and crushed. A horrible sight. Bring that up and say, that's what's going to happen to you. And that will usually take care of that. If it doesn't work, I don't know what, maybe take a nap. Maybe go see a movie. But whatever you do, if you try to conjure that up, as I said, you've got problems. I'll go ahead and tell you the truth. I'm trying to be as analytic and clinical about this, and of course helpful as possible. But when you find yourself being aggressive and/or, some people are more one or the other, and everyone has a little bit of both, but being aggressive toward or fearful of life, that's the two general, or one of the two major categories to which you can see people's so-called personality and character divided, is people that seem rather aggressive and hostile and just generally pissed off at other people and being alive. And then you see people that seem to be more the runt of the litter with their tail hung down and kind of fearful and always shy and just always dreading the worst. And so on, and everybody has a little bit of both. But what I'm saying is, do not ever investigate that. Don't ever ask yourself why. Of course, if you do, most people immediately their mind will say, oh, well, you remember how your mother treated you, and there you are, and you're off on the Greyhound, and you're okay. The way I'm trying to be helpful tonight is, I've heard tales. I don't know, but since the mind can come up with such tales, they could be true. But I have heard rumors that there are people who, sometime in history, somewhere, I forget where I heard about it. I'm sorry I didn't prepare, but anyway, I heard about it somewhere that there are people that would either be feeling aggressive or fearful of life and think, well, I wonder why am I like this? And would say something like, well, you're going to die. And that upsets everybody. And they go, well, okay. And that didn't work. Now, damn, I can't remember where I heard that. Anyway. And I heard that I guess it was the same, wherever I got that I heard also that the people that didn't work, then they even said, well, wait a minute. It's not just death then. All right, wait a minute. It's something that happened in life. Now I remember, it's the way my uncle treated me back when I was at the orphanage. But then, if I'm remembering all this correctly, some of those same people, that still didn't work. Which is why I'm pushing this to try to be as medically supportive and informative as possible. That there are certain people that after that still couldn't accept that. And they still thought to themselves, pondered, why am I so goddamn pissed off? Or why am I so afraid? I'm telling you now, whatever you do, do not go any further with that. That's why I was taking time to tell you that if none of those two work, if you have to, use visual aids of some kind. As I said, And if not just visual aids, if pictures of dead bodies, and maybe go to your local mortuary and ask them. Try not to act too weird, because mortuaries, most of them, I think, are somewhat used to weirdness. But anyway, put on a suit and tie or a nice dress, and just go up and, I don't know, think of some story, but just ask them if you can see some dead bodies. That's where they got some that are really in bad shape. Maybe some that they forgot about, that already began to decompose. But try and see something that will snap you out of asking, why do I either feel fearful or aggressive toward being alive? That will usually help. But at any rate, after that, only thing I can do is just encourage you, from a professional's view, do whatever it takes. I hate to be the one to do this because it goes so against the grain of us health professionals. But if none of that helps, I'm going to have to tell you. And you can't go to sleep. Taking a nap usually helps, because you can take a nap and then normally nightmares and bad dreams will take over and you wake up refreshed. That is, you wake up no longer wondering why you're so pissed off or fearful about life. You just wake up and you're glad to be alive momentarily. But I know it's possible that even under those kind of adverse conditions that none of this works, and you lay down and you even take what I guess should be the extreme measure, you try and take a nap. Even in the middle of the day, anything to snap you out of this, to keep you from inquiring any further. But what I was thinking was, I guess it's possible, theoretically, that you lay down and can't even go to sleep. And this is what I hate to say it. But if it takes it, have a drink or something. Take some dope. But for God's sake, get out of that. Don't keep asking yourself, why am I like, where did I get this feeling from? No. Let's see. What else should you avoid at all costs? Remember, the heading really was how not to waste your time in life, based upon what we're saying about the kinds of speculative internal musings and investigations in which one could involve oneself if one is not careful. So let's see, what else could we do to help assure that you would not step into such a captious mess, a dangerous area? Well, another one is never, ever question your criticism of other humans. Well, to begin with, again, we're really reaching. I know that most of this would never happen to you decent viewers and listeners here in the audience, being as, sophisticated, sane, educated, obviously intelligent and insightful as I know you all are. I know it's very, very slim chance that this would happen. But the kinds of criticisms that all sophisticated, educated, intelligent, and insightful people such as yourselves have with the other idiots in the world. Do not let yourself get involved with questioning your criticism, nay, your proper judgment of these idiots. Well, it's possible. It's possible. I mean, I can see it now. I can see a theoretical situation where you're suddenly, let's say, somebody makes some comment, and you begin to say, well, what kind of goddamn idiot would say blah, 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 like that. And let's say you're staying at a cocktail party, and you hear somebody make some statement about the current change in the potential change in political climate of Greece. And you go, what kind of damn idiot would blah, blah, blah. And the person next to you goes, do you know that that's the boss's sister? Your boss's sister? I mean, it's just that sort of thing that can bring a sophisticated, educated, reasonably insightful person up short. And you're suddenly faced with the possibility of trying to, how should we put this delicately? How to rein in this previously expressed criticism of this person's idiocy. In other words, how to weasel out. Now, I'm not saying do not do it overtly on the basis of saving your ass and your job. But if you have to do it, if you say, oh, well, I misunderstood. Oh, I did not. Go ahead and get out of it. Talk your way out of it to this person. But internally, don't touch that. Because it was justified. You know it was justified. All you're trying to do now is just save your damn ass. To keep them from going and tell your boss that you just called his sister an idiot. Whatever it takes. by all means, do that. But internally, don't take that seriously. You were proper. I mean, the person was an idiot for saying that. So you got no need to question it. The only thing you would question at all was, perhaps you shouldn't drink that freely when you're in an environment that could have an adverse effect upon your state of employment. But don't ever don't take that seriously. In other words, don't go home and in any way, I'm sure this wouldn't happen, but now that I'm on the subject, don't go home afterwards and go, by the way, this is hard to make up because it's so ridiculous, but I'm going to try to make it up. I know it's silly, but anyway, don't go home later. Let's assume you talk your way out of it. Or you get this person drunk and they wander off and you think, well, they're not going to tell the boss, they forgot it. But then you go home. As silly as it sounds, don't ever do this. And then go home and do your Rodin impression and think back on that and go, well, I weaseled out of that again, me and my loose lips. But beyond that, I'm saying don't do this now. And then you start pondering, perhaps I should question. Perhaps there's the right for me to question all of these immediate harsh judgments I have of all the idiots, my fellow man. Don't ever do that. I mean, you can do such as that, and God knows what could happen. Hell, for all I know, your religious upbringing, as mechanical and as meaningless as it was, suddenly something could come back from the holy scriptures of the world, something about being tolerant in your fellow man, and you could for a moment question your thinking. In this case, your judgments, the idiocy, the stupidity of your fellow man. Many of them. Lots of them, some of them, many of them. You be the judge. Don't do that. Do not sit there and even don't tolerate that. Stand up, walk around, smoke a cigarette. If you don't smoke, take it up. If you have to drink, take a nap. But do not sit there and begin to ponder such things as, well, perhaps I should not be so quick to judge other people. I mean, my only interest an hour ago back at the party was trying to talk that person out of, trying to convince them that I did not really call my boss's sister an idiot. So I accomplished that, big deal. But perhaps I'd be better off. Perhaps, should I learn a lesson from that? Did what she say, did it actually deserve my critique of her being an idiot? Don't do that. I mean, hell, you can sit there and begin to wonder and get confused. Next thing you know, you'll try to take up her position and go, well, maybe she knew something I didn't. Or maybe I don't know as much about the political situation of the Mediterranean as I think I do. Where would the world be if you start that kind of crap? I mean, if one person starts that, I know you're a nobody, I know you're intelligent and sophisticated, but what if that kind of thing spread? What if it got to be like a wide scale? What if the political structure as it be in Greece, for instance, since I brought that up, what if they began to sit around, those opposing parties, the socialists and the communists and the Rotarians and those who drive Volvos, and those are in very, strictly, vigorously critical of one another. What if they began to sit there and look at each other and go, Volvo's not all that nerdy of a car. Or socialists go, communists are not that bad a guy once you get to know him. No, what would happen? I started to say that the political structure of Greece would collapse. And I thought, well, there's a joke. Don't write me from Athens in the outlines. The political structure of Greece collapsed. Oh, well. Just a little humor. Because I don't know why you're laughing. See, I wasn't going to bring this up. But you wouldn't believe it. It would really outrage you if I told you the kinds of things that I've heard said in the halls of Parliament in Athens about you people. It's not my business, but I just happened to overhear it. We have time probably for one more, which this should either be at the tail end, which is going to end up being, I guess. or it should be in the middle, which is a little too late if this is the end, or it should have been at the first, which is obviously too late because I've already covered the first. But the other one primary thing to do to avoid wasting your time in life, wasting your energy, which is all you've got, is this. We're talking about internal matters, remember. Do not ever, notwithstanding what I've already mentioned of the specific things not to do regarding your internal life, that is your thinking, and notwithstanding these specific areas I have previously noted, do not, in general, do not in any overall, non-specific manner, do this. Now you got to watch closely. I'm not a trained magician, but I know when you see things on television, and sometimes even worse in person, you think they're tricking me electronically. So I don't want you to feel that way. So watch it carefully. Do not internally ever do this.
No.
Or for those of you given to the distaff side, or gauche, don't go. It's a shame that that's not the end of the tape where I could end there on that totally clarifying note. Some of you knew what I meant anyway. Without being specific, do not, without worrying about individual cases such as I noted, but do not, just in general, with your thinking, ever kind of just go and turn around to look at what you're thinking. With nothing in mind. Not worrying about your judgments, not worrying about your criticism. Your well-founded judgment of the idiocy of others. You're not looking for anything specific. It's just you go and you turn and look at it. You attempt to take your own thinking, I think sometimes, in some areas known as just your consciousness, and internally with nothing particular in mind, you just go to just see what's going on. That, at first, some of you, if you're following this, you might think, well, that doesn't sound so bad compared to the others. Let's assume that the others you heard specifically, those of you especially making notes, I could tell some of you understood the urgency and the value of my warnings. And you were taking notes like, well, boy, I'll never do that, that's for sure, because I can see where that could lead. But I want to make sure that you, in some way, do not now find this to be rather a childish version, and you think, well, wait a minute. If you're not doing anything specific insofar as trying to scrutinize, I'm sorry, I know there's some women listening and children. Study. Take scrutinize off the tape. I don't want any complaints about that. Study. Look at. Peruse. Any particular area in your mind, you might think, well, just in general, what you're saying now of just sort of looking over and see what's going on, you might think, well, now that would be sort of like a fairly innocuous, I knew he was going to say that, hobby. In other words, maybe if we're looking at the previous examples as being dangerous rugby, mental rugby, and I point out certain plays in which you should not get involved when they shout out, R1769LJ, don't get on the field. That was the earlier example specifically. Then this one you might take to be, sounds safer, that sounds like, well, that'd be somebody just sort of sauntering up and down the sidelines of the rugby field. Not actually involved, but just kind of promenading up and down and looking at what's going on. But you would err. That means err. You would err because you would be thinking, well, I'm simply a general observer of the game. Tut, tut. No. That's tut, tut. You would err. And astute. That's astute. An astute, intelligent, sophisticated, educated, insightful person, such as all of you are, cannot promenade up and down the sidelines of the game, attempting to observe the activity thereon without becoming entangled therein. Mark my words. You cannot. It is a dangerous game. It is, in fact, probably the basic fool's game. And if you doubt that, I just give you a couple of for instances, what it can lead to. I just a couple of names. See if it rings a bell. Socrates. Jesus. Fred Wimmer. I take it nobody remembers Fred. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. They didn't kill him. Never mind. Socrates. Jesus. There are also, by the way, I won't bore you because it would be meaningless, but there are at least, I didn't bring them, but I could recite most of them. There are well over 1,200 other names of people who have done this in the past that you never heard of. Because Jesus and Socrates Jesus and Socrates, they just pushed it up to a certain point. But you see what happened in their case. But these other 1,200 went even further, but you never heard about them. Because if you push it far enough, even other people won't bother to assault you. That's how far you've gone. I mean, compared to most sane, educated, civilized, sophisticated, insightful people such as you are, of course, would not go as far as a Socrates did, using him as emblematic of someone who did waste their life. Waste their damn life! Reflecting on the inner life in a serious manner. I don't mean philosophically, but seriously doing what I'm saying a sane person would not do. They carried it far enough that the external world finally went, give it a break. And when they wouldn't, they gave him a break. But if you, and I'm just saying, and you think, most people would think that that was probably a sad scenario, a bad scene, a sad case. A man who attempted to do this wasteful thing, and finally, the external world at the time had enough of it, and did an earlier version of a kind of unsolicited Dr. Kevorkian for him. In other words, they did away with the man. And you could say, well, how sad, how sad. But see, he just played around. Those types of people, historically, what they represent are people who just played around with it. They're people who did it, who wasted their lives even further than that. And the proof being, I'm sure you'll see this, the proof being that they wasted their lives so much. In other words, Socrates, comparably speaking to these other 1,200 people whose name I won't give you because you wouldn't know any of them. But compared to Socrates and Jesus and that type, they only wasted their life up to a certain point. They did a pretty good job now, I grant you that. But they did not do it to the final T. Those who did, they wasted their lives so much, so entirely, not just partially like Socrates. But these other 1,200 people, in fact, in excess of 1,200, wasted their lives so entirely that you have never heard of them. The people of their local community did not put them to death, did not bring them to trial. They didn't even notice it. I ask you, what could be sadder, more frightening than that? So I trust, without having to make up or come up with any more examples, that you see the point, and that tonight has not been wasted. Do not let this happen to you. Let your thinking stay as it is now, concerned with that with which it should be concerned. My right hand, things out there, the world out there, that is the only thing that's important. There is where life and death takes place. There is where your health comes and goes. There is where your social standing is determined. There is where wealth is made and lost. So, I am glad I could be of help tonight. We're here to serve. I am the fireman for your soul. Good night. I started to say I'm your metaphorical